Hey, what's up, nerds? Paul Conti here with James Squires. We're here for episode number 5 of Tactica Tuesday. We got another rip-roaring show for you this week. We are going to be doing a nice deep dive on the Stormcast Eternals, one of the most popular armies of the Age of Sigmar, and the poster boys of the entire new game movement. We also got a few other items here and there before we jump into the main topic. First, I think we should start off with a little bit of news and events going on. I know up in my neck of the woods, just want to plug again the Crossroads GT coming up in New York in September. That is going to be a pretty substantial Age of Sigmar tournament along with events for Kings of War, Ninth Age, X-Wing, Malifaux. I believe they may be adding some other things too. The Age of Sigmar event's going to be using the General's Handbook. The point number is still yet to be determined, but going to be in the 2,000 to 2,500 point range somewhere. In addition to that, Seasons of War has begun. So yeah, get into your local Games Workshop store or your friendly local game store that's participating.
No, there's no point. If you want to do the Season of War, like, go up, play at your local hobby shop, have fun, like, enjoy these scenarios that they put out. Don't bother reporting your results because I'm going to single-handedly power the Death Faction to victory. So there's no point in even trying, Paul. Everybody else should just give up now.
Yeah. So I am helping out to administrate the Seasons of War campaign at my local GW store, doing the matchups and all of that sort of stuff. So if you are in the central Connecticut area, feel free, shoot me an email at paulmconti@gmail.com or drop something in the comments down below. And I can get you hooked up with the information. We'll have Crossroads GT information down there as well. And our play group that is developing nicely in Central Connecticut, going to be getting together again this Saturday, July 23rd. Looks like we have a nice big group game of Triumph and Treachery with Age of Sigmar going to be getting going on there, so that's going to be a lot of fun and excitement. I haven't played it with Age of Sigmar yet. Played it with 8th edition, and it was one of the most fun games I've ever played. So I'm definitely
I haven't played with the true Triumph and Treachery rules, but I've played 3-way battles in Age of Sigmar where we just kind of house ruled a few areas where conflicts kind of came up with how the rules were designed. But it was always a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed. Honestly, I've done it with, I think, every game system I've ever played. We've house ruled 3-way battles because I love the kind of 3-way tug of war that happens in the whole, like, if you get too far ahead, then everybody else is ganging up on you. So you have to kind of manage how far ahead you get and how you deploy your troops even more because you're often fighting on 2 fronts instead of just one.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that led to one of my biggest misplays ever, but that was 8th edition, so we're not talking about 8th edition. Who cares about 8th edition?
It's ancient history, right? We don't need to talk about that mess up.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about the horror of a Knight Death Star getting held up by one model with regen saves. That we don't need to talk about that.
That's amazing.
Anyway, news down in your neck of the woods, James.
Yes, I'm not going to give too much away because this is still very much in the early stages of development, but I'm looking to run a local tournament for charity coming up soon. So I will actually next week, whenever I get kind of everything squared away and finalized, next week I'll report on the full details and post the links below in addition to how you can help contribute if you'd like to just help the tournament get off the ground. There's not really any cons that are gaming related around here, and so I'm hoping to kind of have a larger GT than normally happens. Lots of game stores run tournaments, but they're pretty small. I'm looking to run probably the first large one of at least 20, 25 plus players for Age of Sigmar. But I'll have, like I said, details next week on how you can help support it if you'd like. Again, it's going to be for a good cause. Every every bit of money that we make for this is going to go to a local charity, but I'll describe all that in next week's video.
All right, and my heart just got a little bit warmer.
Your heart grew 3 sizes that day, Paul?
Well, my doctor's been telling me to watch that, so I'm gonna control the size growth. So I think that's all we really had for news this week. This was kind of like a light news week in Age of Sigmar in general after all of the Sylvaneth dropped and General's Handbook dropped and all of that. Kind of back to Space Marines for a little bit. And so that just leaves us with, moving on to our next segment, the Spotlight segment. My spotlight this week is Pokemon Go. I have been spending all of my spare time collecting little fake monsters, and I have not watched any YouTube videos that pertain to Age of Sigmar this week. So I don't have anything to share with you guys other than I have been leveling along nicely. I took over a gym for Team Mystic, and I'm going to throw this over to you, James.
Well, fortunately for the viewers, Paul, I actually care about this show. I'm just joking. And I picked up the slack, and I've got 2 videos for you from the same content producer. Once again, I'm shouting out creative names stand out in terms of quality of especially the production, but just the quality of videos that he puts out in every facet, whether it's the content of it and like I said, the quality of the editing, the strategies that he gives in his tactics kind of videos. They're all top tier. That's beyond question. But I was going back watching some of his older videos today, and there's 2 that I wanted to mention. He has one that's, I believe, in his kind of like philosophical section, like he has a couple different playlists. And he has a apple to orange analogy, which I'll link below, both these videos, just as normal, which is hilarious. And it was kind of describing his feeling as a player of 8th edition prior to Age of Sigmar actually releasing, but just when the rumors and leaks began to really come out of what this is really going to look like. It's and first off, he's a huge Age of Sigmar player now. He loves the game, but even ignoring that aspect, it's just a really funny analogy, and he does a really good job with the kind of story that he spins. And then the second one was a response video to an old topic that Vince did, basically asking what players wanted in the mysterious 9th edition. This was, of course, before information about Age of Sigmar dropped. And what I thought was pretty funny about this video was that William basically goes down like a list of things that he would like to see in the next edition of Warhammer. And Age of Sigmar, I think, checked every box that he had. And a few examples were he wanted to see a greater variance in the units brought from each army. Clearly that happens in Age of Sigmar, especially with the General's Handbook, with how the points and all are structured. He wanted them to elaborate on some of the sub-factions, like they started to do in 40K, like the Militarum Tempestus is what he gives an example of, which is a sub-faction within the Imperial Guard. And basically they're elite troops, and clearly that's happened with things like the Iron Jaws, with the Flesh Eater Courts, now with the Bone Splitters coming out, and the Sylvaneth. Like, we've kind of that's what Age of Sigmar has been, is taking these small sub factions and expanding them out. So I'll link that video below as well, but I just think it was kind of funny how basically his entire checklist, I was just sitting here like, well, Age of Sigmar did that and that and that. I'm like, well, you got everything you wanted in this new game. I thought that was pretty funny.
What's funny is like how many of like everybody's wish list items were actually fulfilled with Age of Sigmar, and how many of the rumors ended up actually being true. Now that we're like a year in, all of those rumors that were going around, like, oh, it's going to be on round bases. Oh, it's, all of those other weird rumors, weird things that we heard happening. Like 90% of them seemed to be true. They were like vague and mishmashed, but they were still right.
Yeah. At least, a lot of them at least got, aspects correct, even if they weren't, giving a real clear picture or a real accurate picture of what the overall thing would look like. One of the things I think is really funny is one that I heard quite often was that there'd be 2 ways to play, that there would be like a large scale battle and like a skirmish based version of the game. What I think's funny is, well, we don't have 2 ways to play. We have really 4, and one of them happens to be the regular Age of Sigmar, and that's kind of the larger scale game. And then we have the Path to Glory, which is like the scaled down, like skirmish level of Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
So that one ended up being correct as well, just not in the way that they originally kind of made it sound like.
Right. Yeah. And in all of, those rumors early on of having, crazy human paladin armor-clad warriors of Sigmar ended up being true. And
yep.
Stormcast Eternals. And, which segues nicely into our main topic this week.
Absolutely.
Stormcast Eternals. Now, for those of you that have, followed James and I through our journey of Age of Sigmar and through all of our videos, you may know that James has a Stormcast army. Yep. And you may also know that both of us really don't actually like the Stormcast Eternals. So
let me qualify that real quick. I love the Stormcast Eternals. I actually like their aesthetic. I know that I'm probably in the minority with that, at least of old guard players comparatively, and that's the crowd I run with. I love them in the fluff. They are exactly what I like in these kinds of stories. And I have them painted up, like a few of them right here, and I've chosen to go with the Hallowed Knights, which is why I have my tagline, Only the Faithful. That's their basically battle cry. Their commander will yell out who will be victorious, and of course the chorus response is Only the Faithful. It just kills me because they are awful on the tabletop. And that's why I have the video that I put out after I finally played with them in a game, and I was like, oh my goodness, there's nothing redeeming about these guys. Yeah. These guys are trash.
Yep, they are underwhelming. Virtually every game that I've played against Stormcast Eternals, they have just been golden tin cans by the end of the battle. And so I thought it was going to be really interesting for us to really be spotlighting the Stormcast and trying to think of, well, maybe there's some things out there that are some redeeming qualities about this army, and maybe everybody's just playing them wrong, or at least the majority of people are just playing them wrong. Because I know I had sort of asked around before we did this video. It was actually a while ago when I was sort of prepping. I just kind of had an idea for a video for a while, like an I Hate the Stormcast Eternals video. And so I was asking around from all these other Warhammer YouTubers, and I was like, so how do you feel about the Stormcast? Like, how do they play on the table for you? Do you like them? Do you think they're powerful? Blah, 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 blah. Virtually every single answer was, yeah, they're kind of underwhelming. They're not really that great. I'm not really that impressed. And then, I talked to Vince, and he was like, on the surface, they don't seem that exciting. But once you start using the battalions and some of their special abilities, they are broken. And that sort of piqued my interest, and that's kind of the direction that I went in with my analysis for this. But James, you were the one that's actually played with these guys on the table, right? Like, I've only played on the other side of them, turning them into scrap heaps. So what do you feel about them?
I would agree. Most of my experience is fighting them. I've only actually played them once, and it was so underwhelming that I was like, man, I just don't know if I'll ever do this again. I'll keep them, I'll paint them, but on the table they may not see action again. But the big thing is they are, in my opinion, underwhelming in every way. Their armor saves are not bad. You're looking at mostly 4s across the board. That's good, right? Like, a lot of things in the game have worse armor saves than that. The problem is, a lot of those things that have worse armor saves or equal to it have wizards in their armies within their self-contained factions that allow you to Mystic Shield them, or you can, you have so many troops that it's fine for you to split them up and put some on terrain to get that +1 to their save for cover or whatever. There's a lot of ways that you can improve saves, and Stormcast don't have a lot of that. And then in addition, they're in smaller squads. They're 2 wounds each typically. For like their standard kind of liberators, judicators, prosecutors, their baseline units. They don't have a whole lot of big heroes other than their big dragon thing that I'm not impressed by either. Most of their units lack rend. They don't have a whole lot of range. They're pretty slow moving. Basically, I look at them and I see what Space Marines almost are in 40K, but Space Marines are just better at everything. And these Stormcasts are kind of like jack of all trades and not even close to master of any of them. They're really, in my opinion, kind of in the middle in every stat that you look at. They've got more wounds than some things, but not as much as others, like, you know, Ushabti and these other like big characters. They've got a decent number of attacks, looking at about 2 each typically, but none of them have rend unless you're bringing special weapons, which you can only bring in larger squads. In the point system, you're getting typically less models for equal points when compared to other armies. You know, maybe you have the same number of wounds, maybe the same number of attacks, but those other models probably have better rend or other capabilities that they can kind of bring to play that Stormcast don't really have. You know, like the fact that their Liberators, which are their mainline troops, are either hitting on 3s and wounding on 4s, or hitting on 4s and wounding on 3s. You just pick one of the two. And then you either get their defensive build with shields where they're rerolling 1s, or you get their offensive build with paired weapons where they're rerolling 1s when hitting. So, you know, no matter what you do, I just don't really feel like, for the most part, the army has anything that's spectacular and just really jumps out at you and you're like, man, that's an auto-include kind of troop. So that's why I wanted to do this video as well, right? Because I'm like, man, this is a challenge. I know, Paul, that you're quite gifted at strategy as well. That's obvious from your videos that you do. But I was like, you know, this is a challenge. This is going to really put our collective brain power to the test to see if we can come up with something that's, you know, competitive to some degree with them. And I remember when you mentioned to me during the week that, you know, maybe we're looking at them from the wrong lens. Like, maybe Stormcast aren't an army that you necessarily play to like kill your opponent. Maybe it's an army you really have to kind of specialize, build, and play to the objectives. And I thought, well, yeah, that could happen. So that's reflected a bit in the list that I built. But I also wanted it to be able to stand up in combat. And I feel like the list I built is maybe the best option that you can do, or one of the best options you can do with that at 2,000 points, which is the level that we set at for this. Because from all indications, that will be the standard that most shops play at.
Right. Yeah. And I've played at 2,000, and it's definitely, it's like a 3-hour game, you know, like 2 to 3 hour game, which is about right, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought it was really interesting to try and attack the Stormcast, because they feel like they're supposed to be like the starter army, you know, that they're fairly bland and vanilla. They don't do a lot that's all that exciting. They have like, you know, they have like their one unit with 2 different weapons options that shoots. They have a few different special characters. You know, they have a few different things that are mounted. But nothing really that exciting until you start digging down into the battalion scrolls, which I think is where like the real power of the Stormcast is, as well as some of the special abilities that like the heroes have. The interesting thing that I find with the Stormcast is that they're very non-synergistic.
Right.
Like, there's not a lot of synergies between units. Like each unit sort of stands on its own, and there's not a lot of things giving buffs or healing or doing much of anything. Like, they're just sort of like, this unit does X, this unit does Y, and there's not really a lot of synergy between them. They work well together because they're a fairly well-rounded force, but they're not like, you know, you don't have crazy synergies and combos and things like that some other armies do.
Unless, of course, you bring the battalions. That's where you can kind of get the synergy between units. Some of them grant that. And I think that's a good point, and it's something I hadn't really considered as much, of like why they truly are the starter army. Because, like, let's take Death Faction or Free Peoples, right? Because those are the two that we know best. You know, you take either of those armies, and we can look at their basic troops, like skeletons or zombies, or preferably Graveguard. I like to compare Graveguard to Stormcast. They're 20 points cheaper. You get the same amount of them. They have less wounds, but they've got equal number of attacks with better scores overall and rend and things like that. And the ability to regen with their icon. And, I look at them, I'm like, they'll probably beat a Stormcast Liberator squad for 20 points less. But the reason that we look at them and we say this unit can win is because we're not taking that unit by itself. We're taking that as part of a larger army where we've built in synergies, we've improved the models, and really, I think you just hit the nail on the head and said, every Stormcast model, every Stormcast unit that you bring is really a well-rounded, basically independent unit that can stand alone. Like, you don't have to worry about being like, is my commander nearby to give these buffs? Is this nearby? Is this paired with this? And really, with a Stormcast army, it's very forgiving in the sense that's like, if you split up your army, you have probably, unless you're playing against a really good player who's taking advantage of it, a good chance to react. So if you're playing against someone who's around the same skill level with another army, you should do okay with Stormcast, especially if you're both fairly new to Age of Sigmar or strategy gaming in general.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And I think there are some interesting opportunities with the Stormcast because they have some really unique and different abilities.
Right.
That don't seem like they're like the obvious things. Like most people that I see playing Stormcast, whether it's in like on the table or in battle reports, it's like they almost play them like they're chaos, right? Like they just charge forward and just like bam, like just try and beat people in the heads. And I don't feel like that's how you play them. Like I feel like they're actually like a finesse army, despite the fact that they're massive tanks with like huge hammers and axes and swords and whatever else they have. Like,
right.
Like they're set up to be like a surgical strike force, but they're on the surface, it says just go smash face. Which once I started digging into this for this week's episode, I was like, this seems like this army might be an interesting challenge. Maybe I should. No, I'm not actually going to buy this army. But it's.
You almost got there.
Yeah, they almost had me. They almost drew me in, and then they didn't. So you want to get into your list?
Okay, I was about to ask if you wanted to go first, but I guess I'll take the lead.
Ladies first.
Okay, I see how this is. I was thinking it was more youth and beauty first, just like in life. But so I initially was looking at building my list, and I was thinking, this is a Stormcast army. We've got to have a battalion. They're bland, they're vanilla, they're plain, they're boring, unless you bring a battalion. So the one I really wanted to bring was the Thunderstorm or whatever it is battalion, where you get
whatever. Love it.
Yeah, it's Thunder something. I don't care. I didn't bring it. Where you have 2 units of the Dracoth riders that have the hammers. Let's see if I can pull this up real quick to screen share. And 2 units of the Dracoth riders that have the axes. And the ability of this battalion is great. It really gives them, I believe, 2 significant rules, but the one that's, in my opinion, the best is that you can pick every unit within the battalion and pile in and attack with them a second time on each of your turns. And that's obviously powerful. The problem was at a 2,000 point level, it's not really that feasible because you're paying about 1,200 points for men's squads of these, and the 140 points for the battalion thrown into that. So, yeah, that's just not going to happen. So the first one is the concussors. I don't know why I want to always throw in an extra R and call them cursors. I guess because I just give them a cursory glance normally. But these are, as I have dubbed, the Stormcast polo players, because they don't look like they're about to fight somebody. They honestly look like their Dracoths are kind of just prancing around, and they're kind of relaxed, like they're looking towards the ground in most cases. So I'm like, yeah, they're just about to swing that croquet mallet basically and play polo. But they do it quite well in terms of playing polo with your opponent's face. Their lightning hammers are impressive. You're looking at 3 attacks with a 3/3, -1, 2 damage, and the Dracoth is a Dracoth. It's exactly like the Lord Celestins. It's a 3 attack, 3/3, -1, 1 damage, with the same intolerable damage where you are just hoping and praying that you roll a 6 on the wound roll so you can do D6 damage with its attacks rather than 1. Because that's the terrifying thing about Dracoth, is that 1 in 6 chance that you might do 6 damage. And then the Thunderstrike is good because we have it very much like the Paladin Retributors, where if we roll a 6 on the hit roll, 6 or more actually, then you inflict a mortal wound in addition to any other damage. So it's slightly different than the Paladins. The Paladins one is if you roll a 6 on the hit, you don't even roll for the wound, you just do 2 mortal wounds. This, you get the mortal wound, plus you kind of continue on and can do up to 3 damage per attack. That's good. You've got the reroll of 1s with their shields. The big thing is that you only get 2 of them. It's obviously a pretty big drawback whenever you're buying them, and for 2 of them you are paying, I believe it was $260. I don't have that one actually pulled up. I've opened up the wrong list of points for that. So I was going to bring them and then these Desolators for that battalion, but I opted not to because it's so expensive. So I did end up keeping the 2 units of Concussors because for a Stormcast unit, they're pretty fast, moving 10 inches. Actually, unless they've changed, I need to check something real quick because I didn't even think about that. Unless they've changed the Lord Celestant, his stat line, he's slower than them. The Lord Celestin on Dracoth, I believe, was 7 inches in the starter set. I need to double check real quick to see if he's been upped.
He is 10 in the order book.
Okay, so good. So that brings me to the next thing that I'm bringing in my army, which is a Lord Celestin on Dracoth. And no, he is not my general. He's a pretty good model. Again, I'm just waiting on my stupid computer to load up the war scroll that I've said, hey, just open this. He's 220 points. He's got that 10-inch movement. He does have the re-rolling 1s as well. Here we go. That's a pretty powerful ability whenever you're rocking a 3-up save. You've got these different options for his attacks. I'm just sticking with the Tempestus Hammer because it's what the starter model kit has, and I like the fact that, number one, it's a D3 damage, so in this particular instance, when you compare it to everything else that's an option for him, it has the greatest potential output for damage at a max of 9, and the next highest is 6. You'll average 6 with it. You have the best overall to hit and to wound of the different options for your Lord Celestant. And you have the -1 Ren like every other one. The Tempestus Hammer also has the added benefit of you get D3 extra attacks if you charged. And that's not to say that these other ones like the Stormstrike Glaive, the Lightning Hammer, and all this Thunder Axe, that's not to say they're not good, but I just love the fact that you could be dealing out up to 18 damage. It's not likely, but you could with just his weapon. And then again, you have the Dracoth, which is its normal, 3 attacks, 3/3, -1 with the potential of doing D6 damage instead of 1. His Lord of the Host ability, I don't care about. It's garbage. He's not going to be my general. The Dracoth has the Storm Breath ability, which is nice. The other ones also have this, the Desolators, the Concussors. 2 of the Dracoths that you can buy or build from that kit have this Storm Breath. The other 2 have a different kind of like close combat lightning ability. But it's nice because, you pick a point, basically has a 2-inch blast. everything within that on a roll of 4 or more takes D3 mortal wounds. So at least it's a decent ranged attack. And whenever you're running him around with those 4 of the concussors, you've got a decently hard hitting unit of guys that actually do all have rend and have good potential damage output, kind of at top end. And he has the hammer as well, so he can join in on the polo game.
You got to have polo.
Yeah. The next thing that we've got on this list is the Lord Relictor, which I don't believe that his stats are available online because you can't buy him just by himself. But basically, I wanted to bring him because of the fact that he's only 80 points, which makes him the cheapest of all of the Stormcast heroes that you can have. He has the ability to inflict D3 mortal wounds from a prayer in a similar fashion to an arcane bolt. He also has the healing prayer, which he's the only Stormcast unit that has like a direct healing ability. The Lord Castellan also has a potential to heal units, but it's more difficult to do. And he's the only direct healing. Also, he's got a pretty decent armor save, and also I feel like he's a pretty good unit to have. But he's not amazing. The next ones that I brought are 2 units of Judicators. I'm not going to pull up their war scroll because they're good, but they're not like incredible. Then I also giving them the bows because they have the greater range. The crossbows, they're nice. They've got the 3 attacks each, but they have no rend, or 2 attacks each, 3 if you don't move. They have no rend. 12-inch range is basically worthless for a ranged attack. And the regular bows do have a -1 rend. And then there's the fact as well that the shockbolt bow, if you take that, has the ability whenever you score a hit. Instead of making a single wound roll a die and make a number of wound rolls equal to the number that you rolled. So, against larger units, the Shockbolt Bowl, is that right? Yeah, Shockbolt Bowl has the ability to kind of thin out larger numbers, especially of things like Skaven and zombies. Then I also brought the Knight Venator, which I like him quite a bit because of the fact that he, is kind of adding a ranged hero to your other ranged units that you are bringing. He's got, a 30-inch range with his bow, and then he's got a 30-inch range with his little awesome Star Eagle, which is like really the reason that you're bringing this thing, because that little bird is just awesome. He does have rend. He's got, a decent number of attacks in close combat, but clearly you're not trying to get him in close combat. When you look at his move and you look at his range together, his effective battlefield range is 42 inches, which is ridiculous. He's basically, as Paul said, an artillery piece. And then his Star-Fated Arrow is amazing if you need to try to kill an enemy hero, because you negate all of his attacks except for 1. And if you're targeting a hero or monster, you can do D6 + 3 damage if you hit. The only problem is it's a once per battle ability, so you better make sure that you hit with that one.
Yeah.
He's also not that expensive. Most of the Stormcast heroes are not. The Lord Celestin mounted is 220, and the Knight Venator is 120, which is, in my opinion, very reasonable. He's putting out, if you took like a squad of Judicators with those bows, and not their special bow that you can take 1 out of every 5. He's actually 40 points cheaper, and he's putting out 1 more attack at range, at a greater range than your squad adjudicators. So I feel like he's well worth his points. He's definitely putting out some decent offensive firepower. Next, I'm bringing the Lord Castellan. I'm not going to pull him up as well, because he's got 1 more wound than your other basic Stormcast heroes. He's got, let's see if I can fix this real quick. It's messing up on me. There we go. He's got 1 more wound than your basic Stormcast heroes. He is rocking a 3-up save, and he does have the off chance that you will actually heal a guy. And then the big thing I really think with him is that I kind of knock the Liberator's ability to reroll ones, and some of the other guys, like the Lord Celestant, has it rerolling ones, which is not bad. But if for whatever reason you're kind of like tanking your force together, the fact that his Lantern gives you the +1 to your saves means that like your Lord Celestant on Dracoth and your other Dracoth riders, if you choose to target them, have a 2-up save rerolling ones, which is pretty good if you need it in a certain situation. And if you roll a 7 or more, which means that if you're just running Stormcast, if you're rolling a 6, then you heal a wound with every unit that every time that they roll a 6 on their saves. So it's just another way to heal your guys. He's only 100 points. He's, in my opinion, worth it at that. I would say that of all the heroes, he's probably the one that I would consider the most of an auto-include, even though the Venator is great, has all those ranged attacks that are, great for hero hunting and all. The Castellan just actually boosts your entire Stormcast army to what I would consider an acceptable armor value for their points cost and really what they're supposed to be in the story. Then I'm bringing 1 unit of prosecutors. Also want to point out every one of these squads that I mentioned is a minimum squad. So whatever their minimum that they can take is, because you're not bringing that many models anyways, and let's not tie up the points in unnecessary things. Just 1 unit of Liberators, giving them 1 of the Grand Hammers so they've got some rend, and then having their shields so they can reroll 1s. And if your Lord Castellan is buffing them, then they're at least a 3 rerolling 1s, or if you've got them parked in terrain, then 2s rerolling 1s. So they can be good. I'm bringing prosecutors again with a Grand Hammer. Again, 100 points, not anything amazing there. They're just quick. They've got ranged abilities. They can help you kind of control the battlefield. A Gryph-Hound at 40 points to just kind of cap out the points that I had left. And then the most important unit, I think, in this entire army, the Celestant Prime. I don't think that the Star Drake or whatever they're called are worth their 600 points, especially because enemy monsters can take those down typically pretty easy for a lot less points. They're good models at 16 wounds with 3-up save, rerolling 1s. Like, they're not bad, but I just don't think that they're worth their 600 points, especially at a 2,000 point game. I just can't justify spending just under a third of my points on that one model. And the Celestant Prime, with his pretty impressive stat line. I mean, obviously, the weakness of him only having 8 wounds. He's not, a true monster, but his 12-inch movement, 3-up save, bravery of 10, his ability to call down D3 mortal wounds anywhere on the battlefield every turn, his retribution on high, which, for every turn that you don't bring him onto the board, he gets 2 more attacks with his Galmaraz in perpetuity. So he starts with 2 attacks. So if you bring him in turn 2, he's got 4, and so on and so forth. But his to hits of 3, his to wound of 2, his neg 3 rend, which is really good. Obviously, there's not that many things in the game that have beyond a neg 1 or neg 2 rend. He does 3 damage per strike, and then the Ori of Celestial Fates, where every single turn. So notice that's every turn, not like battle round or whatever. So you can use it on your turn or on your opponent's. You can choose 1 die that you've rolled, and before adding any modifiers, you can just change it to whatever result you want it to be. So if you failed an important armor save, you can just say, hey, instead of this failing, this is now that die is now a 6, and now I'm going to add that modifier from that Lord Castellan. I'm going to heal him 1. So there's a lot of good opportunities for that. Or if you rolled and you failed to wound with 1 of your dice and you need that to kill the enemy commander, then you're like, hey, that was actually a 4, or 2 even, and take your non-existent armor save at your neg 3 rend. So there's a lot of good uses for that. The fact that that's not a single time per battle use is obviously a big thing. He's still expensive at 360 points, but I think that of all the really big stuff that the Stormcast can bring, he's the most justified in it. And the fact that he can deep strike onto the battlefield without requiring a battalion of any kind is huge. He's a reactionary guy. You're probably not going to bring him in before turn 3, so you're looking at 6 attacks each and every turn. Yeah, he's just an offensive powerhouse, but obviously his weakness is he's only 8 wounds, which brings us to our commander abilities and all that we're bringing with this. And So I'm bringing my Lord Castellan because of all the foot soldiers. He's the only one that has the one higher wound just by default, and I'm giving him the Tenacious command trait, which is add 1 to your general's wound characteristic. So now he's at a 7. So he's on par with the Dracoth in terms of the total number of wounds. So that's pretty good. He obviously has no commander ability default on his war scroll, but so he'll still have the whole inspiring presence, which is almost useless with Stormcast because they're multi-wound guys. So you're typically not going to be losing them in enough numbers to force your checks or where anything other than a 6 would fail. But if there's that one battle where you think that might be important, you can cast that every now and again. But then for the artifact, I'm bringing the Phoenix Stone, and I'm putting that on the Celestant Prime because, as I just said, the weakness of the Celestant Prime is he's only an 8-wound model. You get him stuck in there, he might be on his own to kind of hero hunt or kill an enemy caster or artillery or whatever, which could put him in a dangerous situation until he can kind of get out of there with his amazing speed. But the Phoenix Stone helps kind of negate that defensive weakness because it says that you can heal 1 wound suffered by this model in each of your hero phases. So it makes him significantly much more survivable, which is what you want, because in this list, and really almost any list that he would be brought in with pure Stormcast, you're going to struggle to find anything else in this army that can match his offensive output potential. So you want him sticking around on the battlefield. And that's my 2,000 point list.
All right. So what is your game plan with this list? Like, how do you deploy? What are you looking to how are you going to deploy this against your opponent?
Okay, good question. My thought process behind this list was you have to have the 3 battle line troops. And I wanted to take all adjudicators, but I needed 20 points from them. So I ended up substituting 1 squad out for the Liberators and throwing in the Gryph-Hound with the extra 40 points, as you mentioned you should do in your video, which I will also link below, talking about how amazing the Gryph-Hound is at 40 points. But the reason this army is built this way is we have a hammer unit, other than the Celestant Prime, in all these Dracoth mounted guys, right? We have the 4 regular troops and then the Lord Celestant that's going to be riding around with them. And they're going to be dishing out some offensive damage. Now, clearly, if they get bogged down by a horde of zombies or something, that's where they run into trouble. But if you're kind of hunting your opponent's elite units, then they have the potential to wipe them out before they're even attacked back. Because they can do enough damage, and they can do mortal wounds and all. So they can be a very good hammer unit. I'm bringing the 2 units of Judicators and the Knight Venator, these other like range units that, the thing is you can shoot into close combat. So really you're kind of on your turn having a 2-attack close combat model as if they were Liberators, but one of your 2 attacks has Rend, the one that you're doing during the shooting phase, obviously. And the reason behind that, and then these kind of units like the Lord Castellan and the Lord Relictor is, I wanted to try to think of like a list that no matter what the mission scenario is, that you would kind of be able to respond, I think, well to most of them. You have the Dracoths, which are quick. So if you have to go out and capture faraway objectives or hit something quick and kill it, or, maybe it's one of those ones where it's like you have 3 or 4 potential objectives on the board and only one of them's the real one, but you're going to kind of roll to discover each one and see if it's the real one until you get the last one. And if none of them were successfully rolled, that's it. I've seen those pretty common in Age of Sigmar. The Dracoths gives you the ability to kind of go further down the board and discover those further ones first if you want to try to give yourself the best odds of the closer ones actually being the ones you need. So the Dracoths are a faster unit that can move around the board and deal out some offensive damage if you need it. All the ranged units are very defensive in the sense that, you can sit back and fire with them, wait for your opponent to come to you, and they're as good as the standard battle line units that they have for close combat. So they're a little bit more versatile. So if you need to take and hold an objective, or if you're playing basically just a pitched battle, they're your better choice for battle line. And then obviously the Celestant Prime is just that, he is the Galmaraz blow when you need it, right? He can come in, he can remove something off the table quickly if you need it. he can react quickly, where if in part of the battle, like your lines are kind of crumbling, maybe your flank is falling or your center is, being threatened, boom, he's there when you need him, lending his weight to the fight. So I tried to pick a list that I felt could be, versatile no matter what it was coming up against or what it needed to do to win.
Yeah, it sounds like you went for a very well-rounded, balanced sort of list.
Right.
I like it. I like it a lot. I, however, went in a completely different direction, which is funny because I'm usually the nice balanced list guy. I went with the totally crazy shtick list. I started out with the Warrior Brotherhood Battalion, and the big thing about the Warrior Brotherhood Battalion is that you can take one of your units at the beginning of the game and set it up in the Celestial Realm, and then during any hero phase, you can just deep strike it onto the battlefield at least 9 inches away from enemy units. So that in combination with the Knight Vexillor, which lets you take one of your units from the battlefield and just teleport it somewhere else, I wanted to basically try and create a list that was built around that sort of lightning fast movement, unpredictable locations of your troops, and really taking advantages of any holes or mistakes that your opponent makes. The Warrior Brotherhood is also a huge battalion. It basically becomes like your whole army. So you have to take 2 heroes from basically all of the heroes except for the dude on the Star Drake. 1 unit of prosecutors, 3 units of liberators, 2 units of any of the keyword paladin troops that are in the Stormcast, and 2 units of judicators. So it's basically kind of shoehorning you into a well-balanced list. With all of that, the battalion itself is 140 points. Just quickly running through what my choices were for this. I'm actually going for my general with a Lord Celestin on foot. He is the only thing that I know of in the Stormcast army that can give any of your dudes +1 to hit. So I thought that was a really valuable thing to actually have in your army. There's very little synergy or buffing in the Stormcast, so I thought it was really good to have that extra offensive buff somewhere in there.
And the nice thing is, if he is your commander, he affects himself.
Yes.
So each of his combat weapons is +1.
Yes, and he is no slouch on the offense either. For my second hero, I went with the Lord Castellant. Again, he buffs your guys, and he can also heal your guys. So he's buffing your armor on one of your units and is also potentially healing wounds on their armor saves. And then just the one lone model, actually, because I changed this list up, James, from what we were talking about before after I realized a couple of things about this. My one unit that is outside of this battalion is the Knight Vexillor.
Right, I was about to pull him up.
Oh, yeah, by all means.
Alrighty.
And that is, of course, taking the Pennant of the Stormbringer so that you can teleport one of your units during the hero phase to anywhere else on the battlefield. And not only do you teleport, it can be as close as 3 inches away from an enemy, so you can teleport and charge. And anything that you're within 6 inches of is potentially taking D3 mortal wounds on a 4-up. So that can be really powerful.
Well, you know what else is really nice about this is he also because that's a single time ability, and you look at his attacks and all. He's not super impressive. 4 attacks at 4/3, no rend, 1 damage. But the big thing is that Icon of War. if you have another unit that you didn't teleport with, you're still re-rolling charges for everyone near him.
Yes. Yeah, and that is very, very valuable. I'm a big fan of being able to re-roll charges, especially in an army like this where you don't have any other charge buffs. It's really useful to be able to get that re-roll now and then. So just quickly through my other unit choices, basically minimum unit size on everything. You know, your liberators are going to basically be screen chaff sort of units. You've got to take 3 units of them, but that's 100 points a pop. So, and it also takes care of your battle line, which is very nice.
Can I ask a quick question about that for you? Just
Yep.
Do you have a build for them, or is it just any? Because like I know some people are like, I'll give them the twin blades, so they're re-rolling 1s and they're hitting on 3s, and then so that they have like the greatest chances of overall of hitting and wounding. Or are you giving them like hammers and shields, or did you just not even care because they're not that big of a difference?
I think there's not that big of a difference. I think for their use as being more chaffy and more screeny, I think I would go with the shields instead, just to get those couple of extra saves that you might get to keep them around longer. The big thing is that I want to keep my heroes all in the backfield. I want to keep my judicators in the backfield, and my liberators are going to be up front. They're just going to be a meat grinder protecting everybody else. And then out of my units of paladins, I'll have like 1 minimum size unit of decimators, and then 1 double size unit of retributors. So 10 retributors. And those are the guys that I'm going to throw into the Celestial Realm at the beginning of the game and just drop them wherever they need to go, whether it's on turn 2, turn 3, turn 1 if my opponent deploys poorly. It can be a really, really powerful ability to just drop them in. And then you have the option, right? Like you can use the Knight Vexilor's ability on your decimators to put them also in an aggressive position somewhere else, take care of a target of opportunity, or you can, just take your big unit of retributors and pop that off somewhere else if they're starting to get in trouble, or if they've taken care of their target. You can stick them in a new location and do a bunch of damage. And with a unit of 10 of them, you can spread them out so that you're going to be within 6 inches of a lot of your opponent's units, and then be able to complete a charge right afterwards, so you can get that D3 wounds on a lot of your opponent's units.
It's also nice that they're handing out mortal wounds on 6s to hit, and that they're so tanky with their 3-up saves and 3 wounds each. So that's a unit that's typically not going anywhere fast in terms of being removed from the table.
Yeah, they're really going in, and they're your really big hammer unit. And then your decimators are a little bit of a smaller hammer unit. You can use your prosecutors for hunting, and flying around on the flanks, taking out some targets of opportunity. So yeah, that's the kind of list that I was going with. I like lists like that because they really knock your opponent off balance. When your opponent doesn't know what's coming, it's hard for them to really prepare for it. That's probably my second broad strategy after taking a really balanced, well-rounded sort of force, is to take the wacky off-the-wall force that your opponent doesn't know what to do with.
Right, because they always have to be aware of that, basically teleport across the battlefield in an instant with your retributors. And then with your battalion that you took, I had a question. Is it your entire army that can be set up by a deep strike, or is it just 1 unit?
It's just 1 unit, I think. That's why I had to change things up at the last minute. I reread that ability. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's only 1 unit.
Okay.
But even still, I mean, that's still really powerful to just have one unit, regardless of how large it is, just deep strike anywhere on the board as long as it's more than 9 inches away from an opposing model, and just do all kinds of nasty things to them.
I think that boosts the Vexilor's value as well, because then you can basically be like, okay, my Decimators or Liberators or whatever the heck you want is in reserve for that ability, and then I know that I have the ability to pop these Retributors up there too if I need to. So all of a sudden, boom, you have, 2 units, a sizable percentage of your army that can probably at least give an opponent pause no matter what they're running. Just instantly pop up anywhere you want at any time.
Right. And the other interesting thing that you could do with this too is, you develop a strong center with your Judicators and your Liberators, holding the middle of the battlefield, and that big unit of Retributors, they can deep strike on a flank, and now your opponent's going to fade and move towards that unit to try and address it. But then you have the Vexilor to go, now they're not there anymore, jump to the other side and take care of other targets of opportunity. And meanwhile, you've got your opponent kind of moving around the battlefield, and you're manipulating where they are to get shot at by your Judicators.
And that, with that particular example, you're always hitting your opponent where they're at their weakest.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's basically what I got. I think that's that was the point that Vince really mentioned to me when I was talking to him about what can you do with the Stormcast. He said, they can teleport, they can deep strike, and that is their biggest strength. And I definitely agree. Looking at their units, their battalions, their all the different abilities that they have, they're not crazy on synergy. They're not crazy on, really high value anything. But what do they do really well? They just show up. Like, they just, in a flash of lightning, appear somewhere. And that is extremely powerful. Last week we were talking about that with the Sylvaneth, just bouncing around just between the Sylvaneth Wild, and that sort of ability, doing that anywhere on the board.
Yep.
So you're going to no idea where it's coming.
Yep. It's very fluffy. It's how they're always portrayed in the books. They oftentimes arrive by a lightning strike to an area, and just surprise the opponents. Did you have a artifact or a command trait that you thought was particularly good with that list?
I kind of struggle with that. And here's really why, is that the command traits, I think I would probably lean on something for the command traits like Tenacious, because my general is the thing that's really buffing my troops in some way. So I want him to survive.
Right.
And for my artifacts, I would probably also go with something that's going to make him more survivable, like the Phoenix Stone. And then I get a second one because I'm taking a battalion, and then after that, I'm not really even sure what to take.
Right.
Yeah, it's a tough call after that, because I would have to take, maybe the Talisman of Blinding Light or the Hoarfrost.
I think Obstinate or Relic Blades would actually be your best kind of secondary one that you could get.
It is possible maybe to throw onto the Knight Vexilor, because after he uses his teleport ability, he's not as strong. So you might want to run him up as an offensive, he's still throwing 4 attacks, so he's going to be able to put a hurt on somebody.
Yeah.
Even though he does not appear to have a weapon anywhere on his model. I guess he's just bonking people in the head with that staff.
Yeah, it says he has a hammer, but it's probably just the banner that he's wielding, which is really more like a fast food signpost. It's horribly ugly. I was thinking too, another option is if you want to kind of double down, because you've already given the stone to your commander, you could give either the +1 rend or the +1 is it damage or attack? Either one. It's really immaterial to your castellan. And then your castellan becomes a pretty impressive close combat beast himself, especially if the Lord Celestine's nearby to buff him with this command ability, because then you're looking at either a -2 rend or 4 or so attacks with like multiple damage points on every one. So he's got there's some options there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I think my appraisal of the Stormcast is basically I think that they're a much more to play them in a way that's not a starter army. They take a lot of finesse and a lot of forethought about what you're doing.
So would it be fair to say that this is something that I just thought of, that as the poster boys of Age of Sigmar, that they represent the game incredibly well in how they play? They're simple on the surface and simple to pick up and simple to play, but difficult and complex to truly master.
I like where you're going with that. I doubt you actually thought that hard about that. But yeah, I mean, it really sort of is a little bit of a metaphor for the game in general. Like it's easy to pick up, it's easy to learn. But if you want to play it well, you really need to put some work in and really learn the battalions, learn the units, and figure out how it all fits together.
And really, if you want to play the Stormcast at what I would consider their maximum effectiveness, right? Like bringing a list, like you said, that's pretty specialized, I would say, and you need like a battalion. You really need to build your list for a certain direction, and it's obviously best if you know the scenario because you can do that most adequately. I again think that's a good picture of Age of Sigmar as a whole, because you can build a well-rounded force, but there will always be, if there's an opponent that's really specialized towards what the scenario is or specialized towards any one direction, if you catch that opponent at the right time, then that's what wins in Age of Sigmar. It's truly a rock, paper, scissors kind of game, depending upon what battle you're playing. And the Stormcast may be one of the best armies. If you catch them with the right scenario, with the right build, that may be nearly impossible to beat.
Yep.
So unless you have anything else, I think that we end the main topic on that very deep thought.
Yes.
All right.
We got deep. We got deep here on Tactica Tuesday. We got deep.
Yeah.
Now for James.
So that leaves. Yeah. Go ahead, Paul.
So yeah, our misplay of the day, and I am told that James has an excellent misplay to share with us. Another one of his great failures.
Yep. So you'll probably recall from 2 episodes ago, my misplay of the day, I talked about the first and only game that I've lost currently in Age of Sigmar, where I attempted to charge my Coven Throne and my Arcane the Black into Manfred, had the option to reroll, opted not to save it for a later attempt. The reroll in that later attempt was successful and actually added more wounds than I would have generated with Arcane the Black spell, but it was lackluster, and that opting not to choose, and then if I had passed that charge, probably I would have won the game. Well, in that same game, I made a second terrible mistake that almost cost me dearly as well, but fortunately the dice gods were willing to smile on me in that one moment and say, no, you've suffered enough, you poor soul. So at one point during the game, my opponent made a tactical error and moved up with his unit of 10 Hex Wraiths and opted to run them because they can fly over my unit of Blood Knights that I had. And he was actually within charge range fairly easily after just a regular movement, so that would have been the optimal thing to do. But he did use their, I believe it's D3 mortal wounds as they move over you kind of thing, as they kind of, strafing around you as they move by. But he moved them, and he had to move them just outside of 3 inches range because you cannot put yourself within that if you're not charging, and if you've run, you may not charge in the same turn unless there's some kind of special rule that gives you the ability otherwise. Well, then he moved up a Terrorgeist and failed his charge And then on my following turn, I opted to charge in with my Blood Knights because I thought it's better to get my D3 damage in with them rather than their 1 damage and try to kill this Terrorgeist before he rips them to pieces. And even if he kills 1 or 2, I will regen 1 per my turn per my hero phase with the banner. Obviously a really powerful ability. Well, I was not too careful with my pile-in moves, and I moved one of my Blood Knights within 3 inches of his unit of 10 hex rates, and which he was like, oh great, now I get to pile in, and my mistake of running them is basically taken care of because they're in the combat I wanted them in anyways. Fortunately for me, they moved in, they swung and attacked and completely whiffed and did nothing. The Terrorgeist did nothing to me either that turn. I did nothing to the Terrorgeist either, so it was just a nice big stalemate. Promptly, the next time that I had it, which I won priority and got to go next, I ran those Blood Knights out of combat and then moved in a unit of zombies to target everything there and kind of cover their retreat. So fortunately, I didn't pay the price for that tactical error, but that could have cost me all my Blood Knights in that one turn quite easily with the combined might of that Terrorgeist and those 10 hex rates in combat.
And then you did manage to lose the game anyway.
I did. Not solely due to that tactical error. I actually say that one ended up playing no significant part in the loss of the game, but it certainly could have. It could have taken the bad situation of failing that charge against Manfred and just compounded it to where it was at that point already, because both my big guys, Arcan and my Coven Throne, were still very much alive at this point. But had I lost the Blood Knights, then the instant I lost Arcan, it would have been over. There would have been no way that I could have ever have come back from that.
Yep.
But I will probably have another misplay of the day ready next week because tomorrow I am going to one of my, actually the local gaming store that I've supported the longest for 16 years. There's 5 places that run Age of Sigmar nights consistently every single week locally within a half hour of where I live. But I'm going to that one tomorrow to take part in their weekly big event and get in hopefully a couple of games of Age of Sigmar and not make such glaring tactical errors and move the needle ever closer to a death victory in this season of war.
Very nice. Actually, I have to get my Season of War campaign together as well. The matchups for the first week are up, and I have got to put a list together.
Who are you fighting? Is it preset like that?
Yeah. So I'm going to be up against a Chaos Army.
Oh, fun.
So it should be interesting.
I'll put my money on you, Paul.
It usually is a good place to go.
I mean, you are an accountant, so I trust you with my money.
Anyway, folks, I think that just about wraps things up for this week. So, unless you've got anything else, James, anything?
I just want to say, stay tuned for next week. It'll be the first time we actually have a guest on. We tried before to get Mitch. Schedules didn't work out. We'll get Mitch on at another time. But this upcoming Tactica Tuesday, we will have Vince Venturella on, and we will be taking a temporary pause from our kind of Army deep dive looks that we are starting to do what we wanted to do initially this week, and deep dive on tempo in wargaming, but Age of Sigmar especially, and how important that is. And I think it's a topic that doesn't get enough time. I could talk about tempo in games all day long till I'm blue in the face. I love it. I've got a video about it already on my channel, but we're going to really deep dive with one of the masters of tempo from all of his years of playing Magic the Gathering with Vince next week. So definitely stay tuned for that.
All right, kids. And with that, I say we bid you good night.
Happy gaming, guys.